Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us for another episode of Beyond Code, where we bring in stories of folks who've really gone out, done it. And today we have with us Azitabh. I know this is a name which is common, but it's uncommon as we were discussing before the call. It's a pretty unique name, and I came to know that the name has a unique meaning as well. That someone who ideally is assumed to be not defeatable. So I think this comes to the fact that today we are also talking about a very interesting journey of a person who's actually prioritized learning apart over everything else. So thanks a lot, Azitabh, first of all, for joining us, agreeing us to spend a Saturday evening with the team at Recro and Rebase at large. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks for hosting me.
Awesome. So today it's a very interesting journey that I'll walk through about Azitabh. So just to quickly introduce Azitabh. Azitabh is a director of engineering at ShareChat, a well-known social networking site, which I think a lot of us today watching must have used. But Azitabh today is leading their ad tech engineering team. He has been known to basically deliver and work across data and experimentation team at ShareChat, and has been leading new initiatives at Bright Champs and Housing and Booking.com in past. He has over 12 years of experience in building scalable cloud native and data intensive softwares across industries like real estate, edtech, and social media. But apart from all this, Azitabh is today known for his curiosity, and he is the guy who is often looked upon by young software professionals as the person to go and get mentorship from. So this is all a little bit about Azitabh to begin with, but happy to first go back and take Azitabh to his childhood days. So Azitabh, can you help us understand a little bit about your childhood? Where were you? Were you sitting on the front bench, the last bench, or were you always the outstanding student for the homework? What was your childhood like?
Thanks, first of all, Jan, for the great introduction that you gave. So talking about my childhood, I come from a very small place. It's a village named Badhiya in Lakhisar district in Bihar. I don't think any of us would have heard of that place. So I spent my childhood there, did my schooling from the same place, and it was a state board school. My mom was a teacher in that school. I used to go to the same school. In Bihar, it's generally not +2. So after 10, you go to college. So I went to the college in my village again. And when I was in 11th, after 11th class, I went to Delhi for JEE coaching, spent a couple of years there, and then went on to IIT Kanpur, did electrical engineering from there. And that was in 2011. I graduated in 2011, and since then my professional journey has begun. In terms of being front bencher or back bencher, so in my school days, there were not too many students in the class, so there was not much of an option. You had to, if you were only among a handful of students, you had to stand and sit in front. So that used to be the case. During the college, it's slightly not something that I would recommend our maybe young audience to follow. So I will stop there in terms of elaborating on that.
So it's being that you've been so far that there are left people. So every student in your class was a front bencher. So I assume a lot of them must have gone to IIT Kanpur in their days or IITians. So great to hear that even you come from a place that you is not well known. Though I've been born and brought up in Patna, so I know what is Lakhisarai. And though I don't know the exact part of Lakhisarai where you hail from, but yes, it's extremely proud to hear that a folk like from coming from a place, as you mentioned, works and educates himself from an institute as well as an organization which is well known. So today people know you much better and people can associate of what kind of work you were doing. Interesting. Moving on, while you came in and you went on to IIT Kanpur, and then ultimately today you are leading engineering at a well-known startup of India. You mentioned about how exactly you, in your early days, basically took and chose the path of technology over consultancy during the discussion that you had with the team as us. Happy to understand and would love to really go in deep in understanding what exactly were the choices, why exactly did you make it, and what was going through your mind during that particular process.
Mhm. Okay, so as I said earlier, my journey at college was not particularly great academically. Otherwise, it was like very, very awesome. But academically, I was not doing very well because I knew after like getting into electrical engineering, I realized that that thing was not for me. So when it came to choosing the career path, it was important for me to stick to what I liked. And at college, I mean, everyone has to go through a basic programming course. I also went through that course, and what I saw there, I liked that. And after that, in fact, I mean, in college, you have to do number of open electives where you can choose from a pool of courses and all. So, and I ended up choosing few courses from related to like computer science and programming. And I like those courses. I happen to do well in those courses. So deep down, I knew that this is a probably well-suited career path for me, although it was not as if I was only like appearing in interviews related to coding or related to technology, but I was like deep down, I was aware that this is probably a path more suited for me. And even if it like if it had happened that maybe I got into some other career path, I would have given it a try. So I believe in like whatever comes in the way, giving it 100%. But still, if I had to make a choice, I knew technology was the place for me, and it turned out that way.
Got it. So it's been more of the circuits not making a mark on your basically on your mind versus the binaries did.
You can say that.
Okay, interesting. So, anything in particular beyond the fact that a lot of people, for example, in my college days when we were doing engineering, a lot of electrical engineers went on to like computer science because that person who basically taught was extremely good for them to go out and basically sit in the class. Any interesting stories that you have with respect to how you basically stumbled upon your first experience of tech? What was
Mhm.
your first experience of tech, and specifically, if you can go deeper in helping us understand what was your first experience of the world of coding.
Mhm. So, I mean, I got introduced to this world of coding in the first course that I mentioned. It was a course of Java that everyone in the like everyone in the batch was supposed to go through. I did my Hello World program as part of that course, as like everyone does. And then, I mean, there were like from there, there was evolution. There were problem statements of different nature, etc. And I knew that I liked coding. I liked solving those problem statements. And that is when I became certain that coding is something where like my heart lies, and this is something I can possibly do for like a great portion of my life. And that is what led me to maybe choose additional courses later on in the college. It was another course named Introduction to Programming Languages that basically contained introduction to 7 8 different sort of programming languages. So from Hello World to Java, it was Hello World in C, C++, Java, Ruby, PHP, I mean, number of languages. And not just Hello World, I mean, it was like a little bit beyond that also. So again, this further exploration and all that strengthened my belief that this is a path where I can possibly do well, and hopefully it like turned out well enough.
Interesting. So awesome. Now, any particular memory, if I can ask you, take that liberty of asking you, any particular memory of college, which whenever you say, how was your engineering days? What is the
Mhm.
first memory that comes into your mind?
It's the time spent with my friends always.
Any story you would like to share about, obviously without naming, I assume.
Nothing in particular that's coming to mind at present, but in general, it will always be the time I spent with friends. In fact, I still spend a lot of my time with my college friends. It's a very very closely knit group, and I hope I will continue doing that for the rest of my life.
More of hostel mates.
Yes, yes,
Got it. Right. They gradually become your family and then your parents and then your
they
brothers and sisters.
absolutely are. They absolutely are.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Moving on, and then that's where you come out of your college, and then you basically get exposed or basically start in the world of corporates. And your first job was at that point of time IVBO, right? One of the fast growing organizations back then. What was your most important or most uh, basically memorable lesson that you had, and how exactly did you navigate through your first job back then?
Mhm. So, I mean, from college, I got placed into IBIBO Group. And at that time, IBIBO Group was mostly a social gaming app. So, social gaming, it was its flagship product. And beyond that, it was trying its hands in number of other ventures. One was traders.com, which was its e-commerce arms. One was Voibibo, that still is like a very big player, part of the Make My Trip group now. There was PayU, which again is a very big standalone company. So, I mean, during my college days, I was very fascinated with the way e-commerce was shaping up. Flipkart came into being when we were in the college, so I decided to go into the e-commerce arm, which was Traders. And during that, there were like a lot of challenging projects that I did. In terms of learning, so I can talk about maybe one specific instance. So I was 6 months into the job. At that time, LAMP stack was still a thing, so I was working on PHP and all. So one day, my manager called me and said that, okay, we are moving to microservices. You are going to write a web service. It's going to be in Ruby. We are going to use Sinatra. That's the name of a framework. We are going to use that. So I was like totally taken aback. Okay, I came back to my seat, like did a short search of what a web service is, what is microservices, what is an API. Because at that time I was not familiar with any of these. Still, I mean, starting from that stage, I ended up like creating the first microservice within Traders. It was a microservice for its gift vouchers. Um, and what I felt was that I mean, it was a very steep challenge at that time. I mean, the online learning materials, etc., that we have at our hands nowadays, it was not that readily available at that time. And microservices was a very new thing at that time. It was not very popular, so there were not a lot of learning materials available and all. And everything that he told me that we are going to do was new to me. And I also knew that he would probably not have a lot of time to mentor me or anything. I'll have to probably find my way on my own. But I still accepted that challenge, ended up creating the first microservice in the company, ended up integrating it at 7, 8 different places. 7, 8, I mean, as of now, it seems like a very small number, but at that time, it used to be like a huge task. So what I learned from that is that like you should never say no to like big challenges. Whatever comes your way, you should accept that. And it is like those bigger challenges that give maximum steep spurt of growth, if I can say, in terms of learning. So that was one. And another learning that I can recall from traders is would probably be that I mean that's one of the reasons why eventually I left traders. So by the time I left, we had built a very good product. When I had joined, it was not like in a very good shape. I mean, just the way startups are. Eventually, by the time I had left, it was a fairly decent product, good UI, good backend systems to support it. And in terms of business model, I think it was pioneer in India in becoming a marketplace. Traders was a true marketplace back in early 2013, if I remember correctly. At that time, Flipkart was selling its own inventory. Amazon was also venturing. I mean, Amazon was only coming in India at that time, but still the business like did not fly. So another learning I would say was that building good product or good technology that alone is not enough to sustain a business. So that was an early learning that I had from my experience of a couple of years at Traders.
It's great to know that that you had that acumen back then. That though you were focused on majorly the tech side of things, you still believe that a little bit of adoption as well as getting the business side of things. Well, you were watching it very closely. That's great to hear. Wanted to also a little bit take a step back from what you mentioned, and obviously, as you mentioned, never say no is the attitude that is required pretty early in, ideally more than required early in your stage. So when the first time when a person calls you and tells you, right, that okay, this is what you need to do, and to be honest, there's no chat GPT also to really help you out and find the
Yeah.
answers in a flash, right? So how do you feel? What would actually you see right now, and what would your advice would be to today, that if someone is, because there are today, for example, AI is taking its own shape. Maybe for
Mhm.
example, metaverse will be taking somewhere some person is taking those early bets, as someone in your organization back then took that early bet. Yeah, that let's move to
Mhm.
microservices, let's take that step. So how do you feel someone who really is at a junior level to navigate that? What is your recommendation?
Mhm. So I would say is that whenever a big challenge is given to any person, person should just simply accept that challenge. It seems daunting at first. It seems maybe at times impossible, but only till the time it actually gets solved. So if let's say, and it's not that the person who is giving that challenge to the person is like entirely unaware of the capabilities, etc. So if the person is actually trusting someone with a challenge that particular person feels is maybe too big of an ask at this point, maybe the person should simply accept that challenge, give it a shot, give his or her 100%, 150%. And if it does not happen, that's okay. I mean, it's not that any of us are able to accomplish everything we strive for. So that's okay, but not accepting challenge should not be an option, is what I would say.
So the first step is say a yes, and
Yes,
then
yes,
then and
yes,
then find a way.
definitely.
Interesting, cool. Moving on, and then taking you out from the journey from IBBO and moving on to the next significant shift that you went into. As you mentioned, you entered the e-commerce, and then you're there right at the front with Prop Tiger, right, wherein it was also evolving its own self, an industry already shifting from a traditional route of basically go out and selling and all those. I think the whole aspect of having a brokerage inside the industry while still stays, but yes, Prop Tiger was taking its own first steps. What was your experience? How did that make a change in your, and how did you navigate your own journey back in Prop Tiger back then?
Mhm, mhm. So, first of all, I would want to emphasize on how I chose Prop Tiger, and especially from the point of view of maybe suggesting the viewers to not follow that path. So I actually moved to Prop Tiger because my manager at IBBO had moved to Prop Tiger, and that's not the. And in fact, I repeated that thing once more in my career. At Prop Tiger, that move actually turned out very well, but later on, it did not turn out that well. But anyway, I mean, retrospective now, I would say that's not how one should choose the next career path in one's career. That's one. And then after like moving to Prop Tiger, it was like a very interesting journey. So one thing that happened right after I joined Prop Tiger is that my manager left. So I joined Procter because of that person, and then he leaves in like 1 or 2 months. So it was a slightly tumultuous time period, but still I gave it. I mean, I waited it out, and then new person joined, and it turned out I had a like very good. Uh, I shared a very good relationship eventually with that person. He happens to be a friend and mentor for last 10 years. So that was a first bad and good experience. And eventually at PropTiger, I stayed for 8 years, but it was like a journey that kept evolving. When I joined PropTiger, it was a very small company, maybe 10, 12 developers were there. It was LampStack. Then we started like rewriting some of the technology pieces, maybe modernizing it for the challenges which awaited us in future. Then we acquired Makan.com, and Makan.com was an entirely different business model. And then I moved to Makan team, worked on that platform for 1.5 year. And we in fact decided to like rebuild Makan.com from scratch, both in terms of technology as well as in terms of business model. So that took a lot of effort, and eventually we ended up acquiring housing.com. And again, that came with its own set of challenges. It again was a different technology stack. It was a different business model. It had different cultural aspects and all. So I stayed there in PropTiger for like 8 years, but it was still like working in different companies, three different technology stack, three different business models. So the learning in terms of either in terms of technology or in different types of doing business, it never ceased to like stop. And the journey overall was very, very satisfying, is what I would say.
Interesting. So I think you've been always been at the heart of unrest. That's what I see. While you are 8 years in the industry, and to be honest, in one organization, but you were somewhere on a day zero in a lot of ways, in a lot of angles.
That's true.
So, what to be honest, what you going what was the larger thing, as you mentioned, that you need to continuously learning, and right now there are a lot of things that often I see personally also, that with experience comes biases, right? We start believing in something because we know something, right? So how did
Mhm.
you basically keep challenging yourself when you were actually inside an organization, but still you are at a day zero a lot of times? How do you get yourself going there?
Mhm. So, I mean, in terms of why I would want to continue being associated with a company, I have I mean, in time set a framework for it. Okay. So what I would say is that in terms of learning should never stop. That's the first thing I look at. Then I see at whether I'm getting trusted by the people there or not, and getting enough freedom to work or not. Then third thing would probably be that whether how company is doing. No one wants to be part of a sinking ship. So how company is doing, if whether it's doing well, not well, that's another factor. And then towards the end comes career growth and compensation part. So that's a framework I have set for myself, and I set this in the order of priority. So learning becomes the topmost thing. And at PropTiger, that like kept happening. I mean, when I started, it was a PHP stack, LAMP stack, and then we started moving our backends into Java. Some new technologies also came into being when we started moving to microservices model, etc. Then with Makan and housing was entirely new set of technologies, more microservices, different programming language, different choices for doing similar things. And you talked about not having biases and all. So, for example, at Makan, when we rebuilt Makan, the technology stack had evolved to a fairly decent state. And at housing, when we acquired housing.com, that also had a technology stack that was fairly evolved. And more or less for everything, every nature of problem, the technologies which were there in place were sort of different. Just because they evolved in different, I mean, parallel worlds. So the choices were made by different people, requirements were different. So, for example, for search, we were using Solr. At housing, it was Elasticsearch. For databases, we were using MySQL. At housing, it was Postgres. So eventually, the point is that and with experience, you learn that it's not, I mean, you don't need to be hooked with any particular technology, whether it's programming language, whether it's a database, whether it's some other technology. It's always I mean, technology always works well in the context of things, and you have to choose the best technology that's available. I mean, that's applicable for that particular context, and never be hooked with any particular technology and being of the opinion that this is the problem, this is the solution that will solve all the problems of the world. So yeah.
So interestingly, so one thing that I understand from you is, as you mentioned, Search versus Solar. I assume that you guys were at Lampstack, as you mentioned in the initial days. I assume housing would, and maybe Makan was not at Lampstack. I assume the stack would be
It
different.
was when we acquired Makan.com, but then we did not run on that stack for long. As I said, we decided to rewrite the technology stack as well as the business model.
So
So
so so
we
where
moved
did you go
entirely away
from
from.
Lamp? From Lamp, what stack did you guys move to?
It was Java for the backend and JavaScript Node.js for front
For
end
the for front end,
aspects.
right? So why I asked is that it's also important for us to people to basically understand what the shift you're trying to do. You're somewhere
Mhm.
moving from a legacy, and I assume back then Node would also be taking its own shape. It would not have.
Mhm.
It would be developing its own speed, right? So
Yes, it
again,
was early days for Node.
right. So now when you're shifting to a stack which is somewhere the worlds of Laravel's were already penetrated its own way in a lot of
Mhm.
other places, and then you're looking for moving from Node. A lot of things you might not actually know about Node. What would come in terms of scalability or in terms of reliability. So
Mhm.
someone, for example, who today, for example, again starts his own career. Your recommendation always, as I understand, which we don't get married to a stack.
Mhm.
So if a person does not get married to a stack or majorly don't get married to a tool, as we say, what is your advice? Do we go back to the same models or whatever we were actually taught in the engineering days to be the most reliable thing, that you get married to the concept? What's your thought on that?
That's actually true. And actually, for the person who is new in the career, I mean, just starting the career out of the college and all, person should not be like too much into this thing that I want to work in this particular technology or anything, because at that time everything is new for you. And irrespective of what technology you choose, what frameworks you choose, if you are following good programming practices, like those concepts are actually portable. For example, let's say we started writing our backend in Java, and when we acquired housing.com, the technology stack that was there at was Rails, and that was the first time when I got exposed to Rails. In fact, I actually earlier mentioned that at Traders I had built a service in Ruby, but that framework was Sinatra. And at that stage, I was also very early in my career, so like did not understand those things that much in detail. But eventually, when we wrote in our Macan backend in Java and Spring, then of course I understood it to a certain depth. And then when I moved to Rails, it was not a difficult move. It was like these concepts, you can immediately second guess almost that okay, this is how it used to be done in Java Spring world. So there must be a very similar way in this new framework also, and inevitably you would find a way. So that's why I would say that it is absolutely not needed to be hooked with any programming language or even with a framework. Because if you pick any framework and understand it in and out, then that understanding is like very, very portable. See, it's very similar in, let's say, I also mentioned Solar and Elasticsearch. And in fact, in this particular example, the underlying technology in both of these is Lucene. And if anyone who has worked on one of these technologies, either Solar or Elasticsearch, and has done well there, has really understood the concepts, then the learning curve for like switching to the other technology is fairly easy, not very steep. So like as long as one feels that the technology stack that one is working on at present is decently state of the art, person should like invest his or her time in going into the details, understanding it well, and that learning will definitely serve for rest of the life.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's what it's important to basically know and believe the concept. So end of the day, you should be very much clear on the concept side of thing. I think tool and frameworks are just to achieve it. You also mentioned
Yes.
about Astab, you also mentioned about an interesting framework that you basically put across, which is
Mhm.
learning, trust, as you mentioned, the growth of the organization, and then comes the compensation. While
Mhm.
90% of, or maybe 99% of the world still believe that the last one should be the top one, but this is a lot of us actually, and the larger 1%, which does not believe end of the day makes the larger cut as you've done it. But there's something which often I've heard, and that's coming majorly from the experience, that a lot of early stage folks often come back and tell me that I definitely can keep myself growing in terms of learning. I can challenge myself. I can somehow understand how my manager or somewhere my person who is a part of the organization that I'm interacting with, how is easy to work with. Is he trustworthy, or is he go to person as a large, as a friendly guy? I can also take care of the third one, which is the more of the compensation. Okay, I might take a lesser compensation or higher compensation, or at least be at par, whatever is my call at particular my life stage. But often people don't know, how do you identify that whether I am in a sinking ship or whether I am in a riding ship? What's your piece of advice in order to really get judged from more of
Mhm.
a tech guy, more of a developer guy, to really identify whether I'm in a growing ship or in a sinking ship?
Mhm. So I would say for a person who is very, very early in his or her career, this aspect of company doing well or not doing well would not carry that much weightage actually. Because eventually, I mean, you are an engineer, your skill is like portable. If you move to some other company, you take the skill, you take the learnings with you, right? So till the time you are not in that position to understand whether the company is doing well or not, it actually does not matter for you. And once you start, once you become senior enough, then actually you also start contributing to the success of the company to a greater extent. And hence that thing starts mattering for you more. And hence, and that by that time, you definitely like start developing that sense that you can for yourself judge how the company is doing well or not. So for a person who is very early in his or her career, I would say maybe just give too much weightage, too high a weightage to the top two things that I said. Uh, Prioritize your learning and just see that whether you are getting enough responsibilities, enough trust, enough freedom to work or not.
Interesting. Also, a last question, I think, just to take your feedback on that. A lot of us often are, and to be honest, you saw the market a couple of years, people were hopping on, hopping off. Since we were in that space in terms of basically providing developers to startups across India and abroad. So we saw that back in 2021, 2022, people used to stay for 3 months, 6 months in an organization. And then obviously the moment they get a higher package or maybe a higher deal, maybe an ESOP, as simple as that, they would actually jump the ship. You somewhere stayed for a good amount of time and actually walking through. What do you think these calls? To be honest, I think that they've made the larger change in your life. But what's your piece of advice that, let's assume that tomorrow, if someone is starting the career or maybe is below 3 to 4 years of age, because a lot of because we predominantly operate between 2 to 6 experience. If that's the kind of experience that someone is holding, what do you think? What should be a bare minimum someone has to basically spend in a team or in a product to really get the flesh out? Else, you will always stay. That's what my understanding is. You'll always stay at the surface. What's your piece of advice?
Mhm. So I would probably give a subjective answer rather than maybe prescribing a particular number of years. That does not work because it depends on context a lot. Uh, and See, I stayed in the company for 8 years, but in fact, it was 8.5 or maybe slightly more than that. But I already said that, it was like working in three different companies also. But what is important is that person should, like, I have a framework that works for me. Every person should have a framework for that particular, for himself or herself, okay? And should really understand why person is like looking for a change or trying to make a move, or why the person thinks that now is the right time to make a move. I would all definitely say that learning, if one feels that the learning has stagnated in a particular company, then that should be a big factor for sure. Beyond that, person can come up with his or her own framework. Okay, and like this is a discussion I always used to have with my direct reports or skip level people. Whenever people used to come up for that discussion that I have decided to move on, and I have a new offer in my hand. I always used to tell people a very interesting term that please don't make A to B sort of move. What I call A to B move is that, like, in terms of the type of company, in terms of the nature of problem that is there in the other company, scale of that particular company, scale of the like systems that you will be working on, that particular aspect, or even salary. I mean, salary, of course, person would have slightly more, but beyond that, if everything else is same, then why exactly are you making this move? Would always be my question. If everything is same, then it's only, I mean, money is the only thing that remains. And that is what I have seen, like, a lot of people getting driven by, and which is something I don't subscribe to, and then I don't advise people to follow. And as I said, I call that A to B move. And I mean, in my company, I have always like advised people to avoid that. I always very frankly tell them that if I'm working at housing.com, you come with an offer from Google or Facebook, I would be like very happy to let you go. I mean, letting someone go is not anyway a choice the manager has, but that would be a happy place for me to be in. That someone from the team actually is progressing in his or her career. And I would not necessarily say that working at Google or Facebook is better than working at housing.com or ShareChat. It's just that at least there is some distinction that you have. Maybe you want to work at a different scale or something like that. There has to be some differentiator. It's not that money is the only differentiator and other things are same. And in terms of number of years, one should definitely stay. I mean, if like you want me to be prescriptive there, so if the company is not evolving in the way that PropTiger did, like having different business models and through acquisitions and all, I would say 1 year is the time by when you start knowing the system in and out and start like contributing at a very high speed, high throughput. For smaller systems, maybe that time happens quickly than 1 year, but it depends on, I mean, on depends on the size of the company. So for someone who is early enough in the career, 3.5 years or 3 to 4 years, I would say should be the minimum one should spend in the company, unless there are very, very pressing factors, which is like prompting the person to move on or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, because my next question to you is also you had your own small stint at Bright Champs. You
Mm-hmm.
decided to move out and you then came in across. So whatever you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned actually gets applicable, right? So wanted to
Mm-hmm.
understand the journey because it's just not that you had 8 years, you also had a small stint journey in part of your
Yep.
career.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly happened? I know it would have been a little difficult to really come out from Prop Tiger. Obviously, you've been into 0 to 1 there, but what exactly got you moving to the next thing? What was your aspiration, and what happened largely
Mm-hmm.
at Bright Champs, which ultimately didn't ask you to continue for long?
So earlier I shared the reason why I chose PropTiger after I left Traders, and I mean it actually was a very similar reason why I ended up choosing Bright Champs after Housing.com or PropTiger. Of course, that was not the only factor because I had also now, I mean, after 10 years of experience, that could not be the only factor, but that was one of the reasons. I mean, I shared with you that the person,
Your
Ravi is his
manager,
name
yeah,
actually. He continues to be a great friend and mentor. And I think the desire was there from both sides to work together again. He had left housing maybe 2 or 3 years, 2 years back, and he had started his tech venture named Prioritising. So desire was there from both sides to work together again. So I evaluated many things and then eventually thought that maybe this is the right thing to do. But soon after joining, I thought that the scale of the problem that was there on offer did not really need me. And in fact, I would say that in fact earlier on also I said that in I mean person should the default answer for accepting a challenge should be yes, and then you need to give it a try, and then if it does not work out, then there is always an option to move out. So that's the way I operated in this particular aspect, I would say. I accepted this opportunity and then realized quickly, made that decision fast enough. Uh, Making this decision, and I would still say that it's not a regret that I have. Actually, in those 4 months, I got to learn a lot about how tech industry works, how what are the challenges, etc. Had that been maybe a longer stint, maybe if I realized that it was not a good fit after 1 year, then maybe that would have been a regretful situation. But I realized quickly enough and moved on. That was the good part, and I got to know many things about a new industry. That was another good part.
Right. While you basically love the fact that you had the right great manager and mentor, so your
Mhm.
piece of advice remains is that when the basically the scenario and the environment change, the same mentor or manager would not be the viable condition. So it's
Yes.
also the kind of condition and the environment that you're hopping around. So that plays an important part.
Mhm.
Interesting. And after Bright Champs, I think one of the good things that you came in is you
So
again.
what
Yeah.
I would like to emphasize on that point why one should not just follow where the manager is going. So I shared my
Mm-hmm.
example when I joined Prop Tiger. My manager left in 1.5 months. Actually, similar and slightly unfortunate thing happened while I was in Bright Sense also. So I mean, a couple of people from housing also happened to join Bright Sense, and then I left in 4 months. So that may not have panned very well for them. So I actually maybe share some blame for that. I should not have prompted them to come with me. But like those are the learnings you get with time. So I mean, both these experiences put together, I would say that it's. I mean, one should look earlier on. I shared that one should figure out what that person is looking for at this stage in the career, and then one should see whether that company the person is going to has that to offer or not. So with the mutual fitment only, the journey is going to be long and successful. Uh, and that's why I say that following the manager should not be the right way to go. And I mean, early in the career or even later in the career.
True. So I think what often we and I've seen that personally, as you mentioned, is a lot of us see them together. So it's like you start believing that you're a couple. It's important that you maintain your own identity and start basically then basically segregate yourself. Think about yourself as an individual first, and maybe write down that introspection is pretty important. While because being upfront and being honest, so personally that I do not believe in something that an organization is a family. It's more of a professional field, right? A family will stay together whatever it takes. Professionally, you don't know whether you'll be able to save because your priorities will change. The company or the organization cannot change as per priorities, right? So you, for example, have to be honest said bye to someone because obviously it's not that it's not, as you mentioned, it's not something that you'd blame, but yes, it's something that you've been at the recipient end or you've made a part of someone. But yeah, it's important for everyone to basically take that approach that you need to basically have your individual identity sorted
Yep.
before start thinking like more of a joined and couple oriented thought process that often, or maybe a team oriented, because it's just not the manager or the subordinate leaving, it is often the teams also joining in with the purpose, but actually the whole environment changes, the dynamics completely change, the industry, the business model, a lot of other things when into comes into picture, then it's a different world altogether.
Yep.
True, interesting. Moving on, I think with respect to what Pride Champs did, and as I mentioned, you entered the game of the social media, right? You're now leading an important division of share chat, the ad techs, right? Something that I assume a lot of people, obviously, I would love to understand how exactly would you actually be handling the whole ad tech platform? What's one piece of advice which you would give to all the folks in case if someone is advertising on your platform, if there's an insider that you can share, if you have. Else, how does actually share chat environment and what did your initial days at share chat look like?
Okay. So I'm actually surprised how you know that I am involved with the ad tech platform. So I am. like involved with the AdTech platform for last couple of weeks actually. Before that, I was building the data platform at ShareChat. So at this point, I will only be able to share the challenges that were there in terms of building data platform at ShareChat, as I'm very, very new to that. So that this move has happened like very, very recently.
Okay.
In terms of challenges that ShareChat had on offer, it was so the biggest challenge was scale actually. At housing, the scale was decent. At traders, I would say, I mean, those were the early days for the whole internet industry in India. So the challenge, I mean, the scale was not there to that extent. Although at the same time, I would also say that the technologies were also not that evolved. So you had to solve whatever scale was there at that time with the technologies that were available for that time at that time. So, I mean, with this increasing scale, of course, the availability of technologies to solve for that scale has also increased. But having said that, the shift from housing to ShareChat in terms of scale was simply tremendous. I mean, it's at times inconceivable the scale at which we are operating at ShareChat. So I can quote maybe some numbers which are in public domain already. ShareChat has a monthly user base of monthly active users of 350 millions. Now that's a mind-boggling number. And in terms of data platform, what that means is that we have to process roughly 200 billion events on a daily basis. So, I mean, it's actually very, very hard to comprehend. Before joining ShareChat, it would have been difficult for me to comprehend this number. So, scale is the biggest challenge. And in data platform, so when you are building backend services, you are building APIs, so challenges associated with that, or the like the technologies that you need to deploy for that are actually quite different from what we need to do for data platform, because in data platform you need to have a lot of like asynchronous processing, you need to have a lot of ETL jobs and things like that. A lot of big data related systems come into picture, and those are not the things you generally work with when you are writing APIs for RESTful consumption. So these were definitely some of the biggest challenges for me at ShareChat. And another thing was also that data platform was at a, I mean, the company has of course grown to this particular this much of scale, but the data platform was at a fairly nascent state when I joined. It still is not at a very evolved state, but that meant that we had to make a number of choices that would, I mean, form the core of platform and would impact the whole company for years to come. So that was another challenging aspect of leading data platform at ShareChat. Yeah.
So I wanted to understand when you're leading basically a team which is responsible to somewhat report accuracy at the, I don't think so there is scope of even a slightest of the errors, right? Because that's going to change a lot of things, right? So what kind of skills do you feel is extremely important for someone to really go out and work in a team like this?
So very much, I mean, the person needs to have that attention to details, like willingness to go into depth of things, maybe picking up a problem statement and solving for it and not stopping there, like doing a lot of validation, making sure that everything is in place. A lot of emphasis on observability, a lot of emphasis on making sure that the systems are well built and continues to perform for quite some time, not just working well at that time. So, in fact, I would want to share a thing. So, in general, I hear a lot of people saying that I would want to work in a place where things are getting built. It's always a build versus maintain sort of question that people have. I would say again, just as I said earlier, person should, and at least earlier in the career, should not be too hooked with the type of problem statements that the person is getting and all. Every problem statement gives opportunity to learn things of a different nature. Building in many ways, of course, I mean, you get to make technology choices, you get to decide the architecture for the system to begin with. But to an extent, building something that works on that particular day is also maybe an easier task. And eventually making sure that it continues to work for the next 5 years, next 10 years, that's an entirely different ball game. Taking a present system and making incremental, like contributing incrementally to that in a maintainable way, that's another challenge altogether. And these two are different sort of challenges. So one should not really shy away from challenges of this nature, is what I would say. And these are especially the kind of skills which are needed when you are working at this scale uh, and trying to build system that should not just work for on that particular day, but I mean, this is a platform we are talking about. This needs to continue working for the next 5 years minimum. So yeah.
So, whenever, for example, as you mentioned, you're looking at someone who's meticulous, who's extremely observant in its own way. So, how do you basically evaluate someone when I know you must be involved in a lot of your hiring decisions as well as hiring evaluations. What's your strategy, or what's your way to really understand, and how do you gauge if that's the skill that the person on the other side of the table has? What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So I mean, so how you hire actually depends on a lot from company to company. If you are hiring for share chat, then of course, I mean, being at this scale, like one has to be really, one has to have that depth of technology. That's non-negotiable. But that is something that is actually easy to ascertain because, like, you can give a problem statement to someone and you can understand whether the person has the necessary depth for that technology or not. Uh, it's the behavioral aspect, I would say, that matters more and which is harder to assess in interviews.
Okay.
Uh, what I would personally try to assess would be maybe two, three things. And maybe I may not be able to give a very precise answer on how I can assess this because it's not that I or in fact anyone has like really perfected on assessing these behavioral aspects. It's always a like very big challenge, and one continues to learn, continues to evolve on this aspect on assessing someone behaviorally during interviews. So what I would want to assess someone for is the degree of ownership that the person shows. And that's aligned to the things that I said earlier. Like if you are given a problem statement, you build that and then that works on that day and then you move away. That can be one approach. And another thing can be that you own it up. You hold yourself accountable for like making sure that the system continues working for next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years till the time you are there in the company. How much ownership that you show in those aspects, that's one aspect. Another thing I would probably assess in interviews is the honesty and the straightforwardness the person displays. For example, if you ask someone a particular question and person very clearly says that I have no idea about that this particular aspect, that's a very valid answer. But then at times you get sense that person does not know, but maybe trying to come up with something. So that's not something you want to see in someone in during an interview or during the job. Of course, I mean you don't want to see it during a job, hence you don't want to see it during the interviews. And then another maybe behavioral aspect would be how much of a trier the person actually is. So if you give a difficult problem statement to someone coming out of a college or maybe 2 3 years of experience, you don't really expect the person to solve the problem. You want to see how the person is approaching the problem. And at times you see people who just say that, okay, I mean, this is difficult. I don't want to move ahead with this. Maybe we can move on to some other problem. So that's not an approach one wants to see in candidates, because eventually in job situation also you will get problems which will not be very easy. And if you don't have that behavioral aspect to give your best to whatever gets thrown at you, then that's a problem. So yeah, these are some of the aspects I would try to assess.
Interesting. I think the highlight definitely remains the fact that you somehow really need to do major two things. Is one, really be there in terms of whatever is being thrown at you, and really have that skill. That, and the second, I think what you mentioned is being honest in whatever form it is. Either you know it or you don't know it. The honesty somehow really outperforms all the rest, because then you can have a reliability. So for me personally, if we look at things when we are looking at, is definitely trust. If is he that person that I'm going to give basically a problem statement and walk off, and still he, for example, would deliver it without even a major challenge. Interesting. I think it's been a great discussion so far. We've almost crossed the time. But before I let you go, a couple of questions really, if it could you could answer me. Is one, definitely, if there is an interesting, unusual, or anything memorable or anecdote that you have, which you would love to share with people so that they could learn from it. Anything in particular that you would like to share?
Okay, so I can share one that happened actually very early stage of my career. In fact, not in my career, before I began my professional career. So when I was in college and still trying to figure out what the next career move should be, I actually did a boot camp for civil services. So coming from Bihar, I mean, that's always an option that
Yeah,
people have. So I
engineer,
also, yeah,
engineer,
yeah,
yeah, yes.
yeah. I also had that ambition at one point. So I did a month-long boot camp in one of the coaching institutes at Delhi. And there, one of the, I mean, a very senior IPS officer, retired IPS officer, came to give a talk. And I mean, there is one of the papers that's there in civil services is general studies. That's basically an assimilation of all the current affairs and all the, I mean, the general things from all the other academic fields. So someone asked him a question that how to prepare well for general studies, and someone else from the crowd, like from the people who were there in that class, said that maybe reading the newspaper, number of newspapers well, can be a good way. So he gave a very interesting term to it. He said that don't read newspapers, chew the newspapers. And then he elaborated on it by what he means by chewing the newspaper. So let's say if you read a news article that in someone, let's say a particular player ABC won a gold medal in Tokyo Olympics. Now, one way could be to just understand this much and move on. And another way could be that, okay, this is the name of the person. Where does he come from? Which state of India? What's his family history? Okay, what's Olympics? What's the history of Olympics? How often does it get organized? Why Tokyo? Where is Tokyo? What's the history of Japan? And so on. So you get the gist, right? So the term actually stuck with me, chewing the newspaper. And I have actually said this term to many of the people in my company and all. And I think this works very well even in the domain of technology. When you face a particular problem, you go to Stack Overflow looking for some solution. You at times find some solution, and also get to know few things that you are not very well aware of, and maybe the time does not permit to get into the detail of things like every now and then. But you can always keep a note and follow it up later to further develop your knowledge in those areas which are new. So that's a term that has like stuck with me for a long time.
Interesting. I think this is pretty. So I also did not understand it until you explained. I took it in another way that okay, chewing means to go deeper and really knowing what, but deeper in what sense is really coming out well now. I think this is more of a life hack, more than just an anecdote. I think it's something that it's a learning for me as well. But thanks a lot, Azitabh, for joining us today. Before I let you go, I would just put across three major highlights that we basically learned from the whole session, and apart from what you've already got through, and I just wanted to reiterate summarize the discussion, I think the first learning that you brought again on the table is in your career and ideally in your first days when you actually do not have too many options on the table, you just cannot say no to anything. And the never say no attitude would always be something that you explain and you walked it and you actually walk the talk with that particular definition. The second thing which I think remains with us is important is we just cannot marry a technology or a framework. We again have to trust our professors in whatever way they taught us, that the frameworks and the concepts that they basically brought on the table are the ones that can be applicable to anything, to everything. And the last thing that as I mentioned, is definitely don't read, chew. So that's something that's going to stay with us. Azitabh, it was really wonderful, really talking to you. I think an hour is what we do not actually plan. We look for a 45-minute for discussion, but I think we were so deep in the discussion and the so pointers that you brought on the table, an hour flew by. Really thankful to you for really saying a yes to us for this particular session. Anything that you would like to add or any parting notes from your end?
No. I think it was a wonderful session. Thanks for hosting me, Jan. Really, it was my pleasure.
Great, Azitabh, happy to have you again, and would really love you to help us really build the community that we're trying to build in terms of the larger ecosystem that we want to create. As you mentioned, people coming from certain parts of the country do not have that exposure. So this is something that would really get us going. Thanks a lot, Azitabh, for joining us. Have a great rest of the evening. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.